It's an honor to be back in Iowa, and I'm honored also to be able to be the new president of Summit Ministries. Many of you know Dr. David Noble, the founder of Summit, and it is a pleasure to have the opportunity to come to Iowa directly from having worked with 384 young leaders in our 12-day programs in the last 2 weeks who are preparing to understand the biblical worldview and take that into leadership in every aspect of the culture. So I've got to go back tonight because another 460 students arrive tomorrow to begin the program at the next level. I wanted to begin by telling you a story that may be a little bit of a risk. I have a dog, a lab, and labs sometimes get into skunks. Has that ever happened to anybody here? So a couple of months ago, my lab got into a skunk, and we were out for a hike. It was at night. He came back. I could immediately tell something was seriously wrong. Skunks don't even smell like skunks when you're that close to them. They smell like something altogether otherworldly. And the dog was choking, and it was really I thought, oh, this is going to be a long night. I looked at my watch. It's 10:30 at night. All stores are all closed. I won't be able to get any supplies. But Safeway is open, so I took the dog, put him in the backyard, and got in my Jeep to go down to Safeway. I got baking soda and some of the other home remedies that I had looked up on Google. Then I went down the pet aisle to see if they had anything at all, and they just had dog shampoo, and not really a lot. But I took the purchases to the counter. I was the only one in the store. And there were two workers there, one at the booth where I was, and then one a couple of aisles over. And the one a couple of aisles over, cleaning her little stand there, said, "I can't believe it." And the other one said, "I know." She said, "How on earth did that get in here?" The one checking me out turned and looked at me and said, "Do you smell the skunk?" And I had to say, I am the skunk. It was so humiliating. But there's a reason why I tell that, because in that moment I felt completely ostracized from the other two people who were in the store, especially when one of them said, "It's especially bad in the pet aisle." Oh, great. I felt completely ostracized. It wasn't just that I knew I was offensive to the other people who were there. It was almost as if it made them sick to even be there in my presence. And I have to say, the differences between generations we are seeing in our culture today are approaching that level. That the millennial generation no longer just sees older generations as being misinformed. They see them as being odious because of the viewpoints they hold. The students we work with at Summit Ministries this fall, most of them will be heading off to a university campus. The leftists on university campuses are now stuck on university campuses and not in Washington, D.C. for many of the reasons Kellyanne mentioned in her presentations. And they are angry, and when they become angry, they become bullies. And when they become bullies, they primarily take it out on Christian young people. It is Christian young people who are in the most difficult position. But if you could just look at the statistics about how they voted, I think it would be scary enough. Do you realize that if only the millennial generation had voted, those who are 18 to in their mid-30s right now, if only that generation had voted, Donald Trump would have gotten a total of 23 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton would have gotten 504. But we're not just fighting for a distant future here. We're talking about the way this generation is and how they vote now. And we're not just talking about something that is significant in the secular world. This is prominent in the church as well. We recently did a nationwide representative study and found, and I'll just give you some of the statistics, 83% of church-going Christian young people say they believe the root of society's problems is that the rich exploit the system to hurt the poor. 83%. 72% say they believe meaning and purpose come from being one with all that is, a new spiritualist idea. 63% say what is morally right or wrong changes over time depending on the circumstances. 50% say the root of society's problems is that people do not obey God and they should be forced to do so if necessary, which is core to an Islamic belief. And then 60% say no one can know for sure what meaning and truth there is in this world. I'll be giving a breakout session a little bit later on, and I know there are a lot of compelling breakouts, but if you come to mine at 1:45, I'll focus on these a little bit more. We'll talk about how to see the ideas more clearly that influence young adults today. We'll talk about how to gain trust in communicating with them, and I'll share with you 10 ways you can persuade millennials to see and understand and embrace and even articulate the truth, even when they are hostile to your viewpoint. That's what we'll be focusing on. But in the time I have right now, I just want to share with you something that Nate mentioned, the new book that's coming out, The Secret Battle of Ideas About God. It comes out in 2 weeks. I saw a copy of it yesterday for the first time. You're getting to see copies today if you are interested. This book was a very difficult book for me to write because I was very vulnerable about personal circumstances in my life and how that relates to how everybody in the world has to answer the big questions like, am I loved? Why do I hurt? What is my purpose in life? Why can't we get along? What hope is there for the world? And in asking these questions and seeking to find an answer in a biblical worldview, in Jesus, I realized the ideas we face today don't come to us fully formed. They don't come in the form of propositional truths where somebody says, I read a systematic theology of 10 volumes and that's when I became a Christian. In the same way that nobody says, I only embraced Marxist ideas after I read the 32 volumes of the collected works of Marx and Lenin. We don't take ideas in whole, we take them in piecemeal. So I was able to develop a new way of seeing ideas, to see them as viruses. When we think of ideas as viruses, it's both disgusting and helpful at the same time. You can be infected by a lot of different things. You could be infected by bacteria, by fungi, you could be infected by parasites. All of those things can be killed because they are alive. But a virus cannot be killed because it is not alive to begin with. A virus is a bit of genetic code coded by a protein. The cells accept it into the body because they want nutrition. And then the virus opens up, and out of the virus comes this bit of genetic code. It tricks the cell into reproducing itself and then spreads throughout the body. Viruses can come into our bodies in a very simple fashion. If you're looking at a piece of paper right now, just look at a period at the end of a sentence on that piece of paper. 1 million copies of a smallpox virus can fit inside the space in that period. So they can come in through your mucous membranes and even through cuts that you don't even realize you have because they are so small. Some viruses come into our body like the Ebola virus, which when it first was introduced, killed 90% of the people who got the virus. That virus comes into the body, it tricks the cells into reproducing itself. It also shuts off the body's alarm system, which would alert the body to put the immune system into action. And so the immune system is caught off guard by the time the virus begins to come into the body. So I know this is disgusting to do this right before lunch, but let me just tell you why this is so important. The Ebola virus then, when it comes out into the body, is so overwhelming to the body that the body responds with every immune system tool it has. It's called a cytokine storm. It does damage the ability of the virus to reproduce, but it also damages the body itself. It begins to burst blood vessels. Then our clotting mechanism comes into place, and the blood flow begins to be cut off to the body's major organs. People die from Ebola not because of the virus itself, but because of their body's response to the virus. However, thinking of ideas as viruses can help us reach this rising generation, because viruses, even though they're not alive, can be destroyed in their ability to influence us if we do 4 things. These are the 4 things that critical care doctors do to stop these potential pandemics that they believe could kill millions of people. And I'm thinking these same 4 ideas can apply to idea viruses as well as to viruses in the physical world. Does that make sense so far? All right, so the first thing that we've got to do is identify the viruses that would attack us. At Summit Ministries, we help our students understand that a Christian worldview is opposed by other worldviews that are dominant in the culture today. Each of those worldviews is a pattern of ideas. If you tell me what you believe about God and what you believe about reality and what you believe about right and wrong, I can predict with great accuracy what you believe about everything else. A lot of times, millennials are caught off guard by ideas because they don't see how these ideas flow in patterns. We want them to see the pattern of a Christian worldview applied to society, but we also want them to see the patterns of other worldviews applied so they can be on guard against those ideas. So far, so good? Okay, identify. Second, we need to isolate what about those bad ideas is bad. The Marxist worldview is not bad because it cares about poor people, or it says it cares about poor people. The Marxist worldview is bad because it is materialist. It believes that only the material world exists. The Marxist worldview says there's no God, there's no Jesus, there's no Holy Spirit, there's no heaven, there's no hell, there are no angels, there are no demons. Only the material world exists. And if only the material world exists, then there's only so much to go around. And if one person has more than somebody else, it's because they've taken more than their fair share, right? So this is the term that we've all heard before. We don't want to say, don't think about Marx's ideas to the millennial generation because they immediately will begin thinking, well, so you're against poor people. We want to say, I am for the poor, but I am against a worldview that denies them the opportunity to ever be anything other than poor. Does that make sense? Okay, so we identify the bad ideas, then we isolate what is bad about those ideas. Third, we inform people. At Summit, we teach students not to just tell people things, because that's pretty intimidating. You're meeting a PhD professor for the first time. Whatever you say is going to come across as being silly, because the professor will make it look that way. He or she is in total control of the situation. Instead, we teach our students to inform other people of the truth by asking questions, which I know sounds counterintuitive. But let me give you some examples. When someone says to you, there is no God, you don't say to them, yes, there is, because they'll say, no, there's not, and you'll say, yes, there is, and they'll say, no, there's not, you moron, and you'll say, yes, there is, you're going to burn in hell. You know, it's a quarrel, it never goes anywhere. Instead, you just ask, what do you mean by God? I was shocked when one man said to me, well, you know, the big grandfather figure in the sky who throws lightning bolts down on people he doesn't like. I said, Zeus? No, I don't believe in Zeus either. I guess we do have more in common than I thought. But it opens up the discussion. What do you mean by that? A second question, how did you arrive at that conclusion? When somebody says, I could never believe in a God who would allow pain, there is pain behind that story. So ask, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Third question, do you think that's the whole story? A lot of times people try to use Facebook memes or bumper sticker slogans to communicate. You don't have to disagree with them, you don't have to deny it, you just have to ask, do you think that's the whole story? And then you come across as the broad-minded person, they come across as the narrow-minded person. All right, is that helpful? We identify, we isolate, we inform, and one final point, we invest. We have to walk with those in the rising generation personally, life on life. At Summit, we tell people the DNA of influence is two strands, truth and relationship. And the studies are very clear on this. Young adults who have an adult friend in church are twice as likely to stay involved in church as those who do not. Young adults who have an adult mentor in church are 3 times as likely to stay involved in church as those who do not. For this generation, it is about the personal aspect. So we identify, we isolate, we inform, and we invest. We want to talk with you. We would love to have your children, your grandchildren come to Summit. If you go out these doors and turn to the right next to the 99.3 booth is the Summit booth. Amanda is there, and she would love to talk with you. I would also love to see you at the workshop. If you are interested in the Secret Battle of Ideas About God book, you can go to our website, which is called secretbattlebook.com, and get more information there. Otherwise, I'll look forward to seeing you at 1:45. Thank you all.